In May 2024, the 81st Great Western Grange Class 460 number 6880 Betton Grange entered traffic after a lengthy project to build it using parts from a haul. Admittedly following about 4 false starts, but we've joked about that to death by now. As of writing this editorial, the new Brighton Atlantic number 32424 Beachy Head is more or less on the home straight towards completion. We've also seen the completion of a new Corris Falcon and a Ffestiniog double Fairlie, ironically using bits from their first new build from the 1970s. The new Saint has been doing the rounds since 2021. Good progress is being made with the new Ffestiniog England Mountaineer. The new Standard 3 tank has just had its boiler and firebox fitted. The new P2 Prince of Wales is plodding along nicely. So things don't seem too bad overall since we last talked about new build locomotives. But the wider world has changed drastically since then. If Railway Press didn't need a reality check before the Bat Plague, As previously explained in another episode, new builds can and have provided employed work for engineering firms. They've often proven more reliable as a fresh out-of-the-box machine rather than a veteran one that's been rebuilt so many times but needs more looking after than it used to. And they've been major talking points and publicity pieces amongst rail fans and the public. It was a new build that stole the show on Paddington 2 and Top Gear, while other production companies were resorting to using false trains to appear on camera. And it's not the only new build that's made headlines in the name of publicity. When the Ffestiniog and Welsh Highland Railway outshot their latest double Fairlie, James Spooner, in October 2023, General Manager Paul Lowen was quoted saying, "So what does James Spooner do? Well, it prompts questions. People will look at it and they will say, why has he got a bell and a whistle? Why is it that colour? Why is it that shape? Why is it different?" And people look and they'll come up to it and go, "Oh, look at those stars in the cab and all this stuff." It will just prompt conversations and it will attract people in a way that a Black 5 sadly won't, as much as I love them. But that's what we need to do. For a modern generation, we need people to go, hold on, what's this then? If we can do that, that is the very essence of what will keep the railway going. And okay, he might have been referring specifically to a convertible double Fairlie, but yeah, there's little denying that when it comes to finding new ways of public engagement, a simple case of, what is this and what does it do, can be a new hook for some people, something which, in many cases, can be best achieved with a new build. It's interesting to note that the majority of current new build projects seem to be quite specifically chosen based on their practicality and vintage, whether it's big mainline stuff like the P2s, the Patriot and the Clan, or really small and really elderly designs like the proposed Northeastern Y8 or the Great Central Class 2 440 number 567. Sure, you've got a selection of mid-range examples like the Standard 3 tank and the LNER G5, but for the most part it's either really small or really old designs that can be built relatively inexpensively, or it's bigger stuff that can potentially earn its keep on the heritage circuit or the big railway. One question that keeps springing to mind though doesn't concern locomotives, but carriages. With the event of central door locking now becoming a legal requirement for heritage stock on the national network, how long before proposals are being made to build whole new fleets of replica coaching stock to old-fashioned designs, but with modern materials and interior layouts? I wonder how often it comes up in conversation about, for instance, building a new fleet of Maunsels with steel bodies and disabled access corridor interiors, or the same thing applying to a new rake of Great Western super saloons, or a coronation set, or insert your rake of preference here. Yeah, I know, it sounds like I'm just getting into the realms of armchair fantasy, as it would likely cost millions if not hundreds of millions of pounds to do, but seriously, the oldest Mark I coaching stock is now well into its 70s, and there's only so many times you can retrofit what you've currently got to comply with modern needs of comfort and safety. As certain mainline tour operators have already found out, if they're not up to the task anymore, then they're simply not going to be allowed to run anymore. And there's obviously so many Mark IIs, 3s and so on available to go round, many of which wouldn't look right behind steam. Wooden-bodied coaching stock was once allowed on the main line in the 70s and 80s, but obviously not allowed now. How long before Mark Is will suffer the same fate? But anyway, back to locos. The biggest question in light of the times we live in is, how many of these new builds are actually going to be finished? When skills are being passed down from one generation to the next, with no big locomotive engineering institutes catering to steam technology, there's no standard way of telling how good some of these engines are going to be. Because even if you build a tried and tested machine to proven specifications and drawings, it's still possible to make a lemon. Locomotives initially outshopped by Winson Engineering, including the Bure Valley Railway's No. 10 Mark Timothy, soon had to be re-engineered by other firms such as Allen Keefe in order to function as intended. Sure, many heritage railways have run successful apprenticeship schemes for well over 20 years now, But even these can become hard to sustain over time, especially if the apprentice in question ends up either falling short, being invalided out, or simply fancies taking some higher paid work elsewhere. We've seen in the last few years what's happened to the LMS Patriot, with large chunks of the engine proving to be defective, having to be thrown away and started again. The Patriot Project have explained, and will continue to explain if you spoke to them whenever they're at one of their shows, what went wrong, how they're progressing with the engine, and the steps they'll take in order to see it through to its completion. But it all goes to prove that every step of the process of locomotive construction can, and will, throw its curveballs. We've also seen one of the two B-17 projects dropped off the back of the pandemic, so with costs going up and skills slowly fading away, how can people not show concern that if they invest their money into a project like this, there's every chance that said project might not be completed and their investment might become effectively wasted? Emphasis on might here. Even when they're completed, it then becomes a matter of making sure these projects are viable in the long run. Arguably, the days of building something just for the sake of it never existed, because every new build project has needed to fulfill a necessary purpose of some kind. In cases like the Ffestiniog or Corris railways, it's to provide new members of the locomotive fleet for regular passenger carrying services. The same could be said for the new Standard 3 tank or the G5. Eventually, the same could be said for the new LNER Gresley tank proposed by the A1 Steam Trust. I know I've been sceptical of the new Clan Hengist project here in their attempt to fit in on the main line, but with mainline paths getting tighter, Preserved Jubilee No. 45596 Bahamas has been undertaking work previously done by Black Fives. So with the Clan effectively being a standard Jubilee equivalent, I'll gladly hold up my hands and say maybe there's more room for her in the future than I first thought. Sorry for misjudging you guys, best of luck to you. Meanwhile, others, naming no names, might be nice things to have for some people, but what work could they realistically do? Yeah, it'll be nice to see a replica Big Bertha or a new J50, but one is a coal-hungry single-purpose banking engine, the other is a shunter, and preservation already has plenty of those. So, what about the Big T, the one that arguably kicked off the new build steam craze, even though it was technically Earl of Merioneth? Tornado's latest overhaul is reported to cost £1 million, despite costing £3 million to build 16 years ago. Details were covered on episode 35 of the Green Signals podcast, but the long and short is, the engine has covered 130,000 miles, which is getting on for what was considered the norm between heavy general overhauls in steam days. When this is coupled with the general cost of living spiralling out of control, suddenly everything has become more expensive, including materials. In January 2021, steel was averaging around £585 a tonne. 3 years on, with everything that's happened, it's averaged around £1,300 a tonne. The engine may be a youngster compared to other standard gauge mainline locos, but she's been built more or less the same way, with more or less the same materials, and worked pretty hard in that time. Many heritage railways consider 10,000 miles a year as quite high for an engine. This one did that in a few months. Who knows how many more miles she'll cover by the end of the next decade? Okay, there's no real way of telling how long mainline steam will last, but she's probably in better condition to achieve higher mileage than some mainline performers. After that, who knows? Will there be another case of Earl of Merioneth, where after 40 years of constant use, the engine is considered life expired? The future is anyone's guess, but it's up to those in charge to direct where it goes. These are interesting times we're living in, not least because there's some of the most unaffordable ones. Who knows for sure what will and won't be finished in the end? Hell, some of the biggest heritage railways in the country aren't even sure if they'll be around for much longer without 5 or 6 figure emergency appeals. If one of the big lines goes under, how difficult will things be for a small group starting from the ground up? We'll just have to sit things out and see how future new build engines turn out. If you'd like to support any of those mentioned in this video, then I'll leave a few links in the description below. But for the sake of keeping discourse going, what do you think of some of the new build projects going on at various stages? Which ones do you think will be finished in the current climate? Which ones do you think will find a useful purpose, and where? Which ones are you willing to support? Are you surprised that some of them are costing more than initially projected? Or do you simply have time on your hands? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Or in the pub, whichever's best. Mine's a pint of Spitfire. I'm Chris, and I'm here to gauge the issue.
I lost my mind in lockdown, time and time again. I lost my